Hey, welcome to Caritas Querens. So on November 1st, I released a video about All Saints' Day and seeing that from the perspective of apokatastasis, or Christian Universalism. And now it is November 2nd, which the Catholic Church commemorates as the commemoration of all the faithful departed, or popularly called All Souls' Day. This is a day when the Church encourages believers to pray especially for those who are in what the Catholic Church calls purgatory. Okay, so let me talk about that a little bit real quickly. Purgatory, in case you're not familiar with Catholic teaching, the Catholic Church teaches that there ultimately are three destinations, in a sense, that a person might come to at the end of their life. Some who have been already perfected in this life and have achieved full union with God go directly to the state that we call heaven. Others who die without God's grace end up going to what we call hell. And those who die with God's grace in union with Christ in his life, but who still need some perfecting, who still have some impurities that need to be worked out, some imperfections that need to be undone, so to speak, or completed, they go to a kind of intermediary place or status called purgatory, which is, as its name implies, a place of purgation or purification. Now, it's interesting because when I started researching and studying Christian Universalism, I found that the vast majority of Christian Universalists actually, what they call hell is very similar to what Catholics call purgatory. In fact, I remember reading, I forget who it was, but there was some person who said when the Protestant reformers, when they looked at eschatology and they looked at heaven and hell and purgatory, they decided to get rid of one of them and they got rid of the wrong one. They got rid of hell and they should have, or they got rid of purgatory and they should have gotten rid of hell. And so a lot of Christian Universalists will describe hell as very similar to purgatory, as a place that is temporary, a place of suffering, but a place of temporary remediation, amelioration, and purification of sinners who die not yet in full union with God. As a Catholic, I do believe in a distinction between hell and purgatory. And so I thought it would be useful maybe in this video, because I've had some people leave comments and ask me about this, because I've made some videos in the past where I've said that I do think it makes sense that there is such a thing as an endless hell, although maybe the terminology I've used there is a little confusing. But I do believe that there is a real distinction between hell and purgatory. And so I thought this would be a good opportunity to just briefly describe my view on this. I know it's not a very common view, and it is in some ways very different from the view that many Christian Universalists take, but it has been influenced by my own Catholic background, and in my humble opinion, I believe that it actually enriches the view of Christian Universalism. So just as I believe that Universalism enriches the rest of the faith that I believe in, that I accept, that I live, I believe also that holding on to a distinction between hell and purgatory also enriches my understanding of universalism. And here's why. So I like to see it as, to put it bluntly, I think that really hell and purgatory are, in a sense, two different aspects of the same process of sanctification. In fact, I would say that heaven is really part of that as well, that there are, in a sense, three aspects, a trifold or trinitarian aspect of our eschatological destiny, of what awaits us after this life. And I've sometimes explained it with analogies in the past. So one of the first analogies I've used is an analogy of somebody who is suffering from cancer, okay? And I've known several people, some very close family, in fact, who have had cancer, who have survived it, who have suffered very much from it. And the reality is that the cancer itself, the cancerous mass or the cancerous body, is something that really can't be fixed. Okay, you can't just take a medicine that turns the cancerous cells better again. The cancer really, the best thing that can be hoped for is that the cancer be cut out, be excised, cast out of the body, forever separated from the body, so that the body then can get back to normal, to being a fully human body. In a sense, the cancer is kind of a perversion of the human body, of the human body cells. And so then once the cancer is removed, then the person can get back to regaining health, can get strengthened, can regain their proper way of life. and then perhaps work on really developing into the person that they were meant to be. So I've seen that as kind of an analogy of my understanding of eschatology, of the hell and purgatory and heaven aspect. So the idea is that hell is, in a sense, the aspect of the afterlife in which the cancer is dealt with, in which the part of us that cannot be fixed, that cannot be remediated, that cannot be restored, is cut out and is forever separated from us. That's why I call it an endless hell, because the consequence of it is endless. The separation of what is alien to us, of what is a perversion of our nature, that cancer, the separation is forever. It's endless, and that's a good thing. I mean, cancer survivors. My mother, for instance, she's had cancer, and she rejoices every year that she gets checked and finds that the cancer is still away, that it has not come back. So she would be absolutely joyful to know that it never comes back, that it is endlessly separated from her. That is what I would call hell. Purgatory would be that process of rehabilitation afterwards, in which the person is restored to proper health. And then, when the person achieves the fullness of their personhood, the fullness of the development of who they are meant to be, then I would call that heaven. Another way I've looked at it is to take the image, which I took from the scriptures, of God as a refining fire. Okay, so if you get metal ore from the ground, one of the first things you got to do is you gotta separate the metal from all the bad stuff, all the foreign elements. Okay, and that often involves fire. It involves heat, and that fire separates the impurities, separates the bad stuff from the metal, from the metal ore. And what's done is it's scooped off, it's taken away, and it's separated from the metal. You don't want it to go back in the metal. It is separated endlessly. That same fire, then, if there are minor impurities or something, can burn up some of those minor problems, the dross and so on, in the metal. And I would say that is basically akin to purgatory, to the metal being purified once it has the foreign elements removed from it. And then finally, once you decide to make the metal into something, whatever it is, a beam or a sword or whatever, that fire comes back again to temper the metal and to form it. And that would be, that formation of the metal, that development of the metal into what you intend it to be, into what the Creator intends it to be, that is akin to heaven. So again, you see a threefold process there of first the fire separating the foreign elements from the metal ore, and then the fire burning up the impurities, and then finally the fire tempering the metal into its final shape, into its perfect form. But I was thinking today of another analogy that I'd like to share, because it's been really rainy here lately, and we have a little fire pit, and we have some logs and branches up there. And every once in a while, the kids will ask me, "Oh, can we have a fire?" And one of the things I've seen sometimes is, you really got to wait until the wood is wet. We just have our wood stacked out in the open, so when it rains, it gets wet, and it takes several days, sometimes more than a week, for it to really dry out so that you can really use it. And what happens is when you have a fire going, I take a branch of wood, for instance, and I stick it in the fire. You see a process starting to take place. First of all, what usually we first see is you start to see the end of it kind of like fizzing and bubbling. And that's actually the moisture, right? The water being forced out by the heat of the fire itself, by the heat of the fire that the branch is now in. And again, I think that represents hell, where the elements of that branch, which are incompatible with the fire, namely the water and the moisture, are forced out and evaporated, and they're gone, okay? And then chemical processes take place in which the branch itself, some elements of it, end up getting annihilated in a sense. They end up turning to ash and getting burnt up. And in my mind, that's kind of like purgatory, where there are elements of us that need to be perfected, need to be burned away, so to speak, so that what's left can be the pure fuel for the fire, or maybe I shouldn't say the pure fuel for the fire, but the pure basis of the fire, capacity for the fire. And then what happens is, Out of that chemical process, there is some ash, there is some waste that gets burned up, but then there's also energy. The wood is transferred into the fire, so that really the wood becomes, in some sense, almost identical with the fire. It shares the nature of the fire. It burns up and it becomes the pure energy of the fire itself. And that is what I would say is heaven. Now, in my opinion, all of this is really part of the same process. They're really, in a sense, three different aspects of the same process, and really all of it driven by God Himself, who is a consuming fire. In His presence, I believe that those parts of us that are incompatible with Him, what I think St. Paul referred to as the old man, they are cut out and they are endlessly separated from us, like the cancer being cut out, like the foreign elements separated from the metal ore, and like the moisture that is purged out of the wood. Next, the fire burns up any impurities, and in a sense, it purifies the person, the soul. Just like, again, the person, the cancer survivor going through rehab, or the metal being purged of its dross, or the branch being burned up and the ashes being forced away or being burned away. And then finally comes the perfection. When the person, the cancer survivor, develops into the person God has meant them to be, or when the metal is tempered into its proper form, or when the branch really becomes one with the fire, one with the flame. And I think all of that is driven by the presence of God, the consuming fire. And our ultimate destiny is to be united with Him, to be branches in the fire. Now, there is a flaw with that analogy, and the flaw is, of course, that a normal branch is burned up, right? But maybe we get a sense of our destiny in that story in the book of Exodus, where Moses saw a bush that was on fire but not being consumed. Maybe that is what we are meant to be, bushes that are pure, that are purged of their moisture and purged of impurities, and yet ever on fire with the fire of God's presence, always burning with His presence, and yet never consumed. So anyway, on All Souls Day, I personally want to remember that this is what I think happens after death. And I think this is what many people are undergoing right now as I speak and as you watch this video. And I want to pray for them. I want to help them. I want to be mindful of them. And I want to also be mindful that this is what I need to go through too, whether in this life or in the next. I remember reading something one time by Father Reginald Garrigou-Lagrange, who is not a very popular author amongst Universalists, as he unabashedly accepted a predestinarian view of eschatology. But I remember one time reading a book he wrote years and years ago about eschatology, the four last things. And one of the things he said about purgatory was that the souls in purgatory suffer immensely. They suffer unlike anything they've ever suffered in this life. And yet at the same time, concurrently, they have great joy, greater joy than they ever experienced in this life. And I think that's a beautiful sentiment, to remember on All Souls Day, that the people who are undergoing this purging, this purification, this perfection in the presence of God Himself, in the presence of God, the consuming fire, the refiner's fire, in the presence of God Himself, who is love, who is the flame of love, that they are suffering immensely, and that should be a warning for us, and yet at the same time that they are rejoicing greatly, knowing that all of this is working their salvation. And that should be a sign of great hope, I believe, for all of us. So today I ask you to please remember all of the souls of the departed, those who have not yet come to full union with God, to full perfection of who God intends them to be. Remember them in your prayers with me. And I ask you to work out your salvation with fear and trembling, as I intend to do. Use this life now to undergo that process, to allow God to purify you. So at the end of this life, you can go straight to full union with Him. You can go straight to the nuptial festival and enjoy that burning love of God Himself. So if you've enjoyed this, I ask you to please like and subscribe and share with others you think might benefit. And as always, I always appreciate your comments and your feedback, so don't be afraid to share. I try to reply to all the comments that are left to me with some, I hope, significant responses. Until next time, adios.